Chapter 1. The Fall of a Titan. The air in Memphis, Tennessee carried the faint scent of barbecue smoke from Beale Street as Jack Rusty Malone sat in his pickup truck, staring at the Shelby County Courthouse. It was late August 2025, and the humidity clung to his skin like a second shirt. At 42, Rusty was a broad-shouldered man, standing 6 feet 3 inches and weighing a solid 240 pounds. Muscle earned from years of flipping houses along the Mississippi River. His dark hair was streaked with gray, a testament to the stress of the past 2 years. Today, though, wasn't about real estate. It was about revenge. 2 years ago, Rusty had everything: a modest but thriving business renovating homes in Midtown Memphis, a cozy house on Mud Island, and a 16-year-old daughter, Clara, who idolized him. His wife, Evelyn, had been the polished half of their partnership. Born in small-town Tupelo, Mississippi, she climbed the ladder at a prestigious law firm in downtown Memphis, trading her southern drawl for a sharp corporate edge. Rusty had loved her for it once, but that love died the night he caught her with a junior partner in a swanky condo overlooking the riverfront. The divorce was a bloodbath. Evelyn's firm, Grayson and Holt, stacked the deck with high-powered attorneys, painting Rusty as an unstable, blue-collar thug unfit to raise Clara. The judge, some slick-haired crony named Harold Grayson, who Rusty suspected had more than a professional interest in Evelyn, ruled in her favor. Rusty lost custody, his Mud Island home, and was saddled with $7,000 a month in combined spousal and child support, despite Evelyn pulling 6 figures as a partner. It was a gut punch, but Rusty wasn't the type to roll over. He'd grown up scrapping in the rough streets of South Memphis, and he'd learned early that you don't let a bully walk away unscathed. He started small, paying the $2,500 spousal support in rolled pennies and nickels, delivered by a rented armored truck to Evelyn's new $1.2 million mansion in Germantown. The first time, she'd screamed at him from her manicured lawn as neighbors gawked, coins spilling across her hardwood floors. "Hope your boyfriend enjoys counting that," Rusty had yelled, grinning as he peeled away in his truck. It was petty, but it felt good, like a jab to the ribs before the real fight. Today, though, was the knockout punch. Rusty had spent the last year building a plan, piece by piece, with help from old friends and a few shady contacts from his days running with a crew in Fraser. He'd uncovered dirt on Evelyn's firm, embezzlement, bribery, even a sex scandal involving Grayson and a city councilman from East Memphis. Hidden cameras planted by a cleaning crew he'd paid off in cash had captured it all. His brother Tommy, a tech whiz living in Nashville, had scrubbed the footage and prepped it for an anonymous drop online, tagged with a simple motto Rusty lived by: "Don't cross the river." It was a nod to the Mississippi, the dividing line between those who messed with him and those who paid for it. The courthouse loomed ahead as Rusty checked his watch. 10:45 a.m. In 15 minutes, he'd face Grayson again, this time for violating a court order. After months of paying in coins, Evelyn had dragged him back to court, claiming harassment. Rusty knew Grayson would slap him with jail time, probably 90 days in the Shelby County Jail. He didn't care. The videos would hit the internet at noon, and by then, he'd be in a cell, untouchable while the world watched Evelyn's empire burn. He stepped out of the truck, his boots crunching gravel, and lit a cigarette. Across the street, a man in a cheap suit snapped a photo. Process server, no doubt. Rusty smirked as the guy dropped a summons at his feet and muttered, "You've been served," before scurrying off. Another court date, another fight. He picked up the paper, glancing at the date. September 5th, 2025. Plenty of time to prepare. Inside, the courtroom smelled of polished wood and stale coffee. Evelyn sat up front, her blonde hair pulled into a tight bun, whispering to her lawyer, a smug bastard named Paul Holt. Clara wasn't there. Evelyn had kept her away since the divorce, claiming Rusty was a bad influence. Grayson took the bench, his gavel cracking like a gunshot. "Mr. Malone," Grayson drawled, peering over his glasses, "you've been paying your spousal support in a manner that's, frankly, absurd. Care to explain?" Rusty stood, hands in his pockets. "Your Honor, Title 31, Section 5103 says coins are legal tender for all debts. I'm following the law. If Mrs. Malone doesn't like hauling pennies to the bank, that's her problem. Holt jumped up. Your Honor, this is harassment. He's dumping bags of change in her home. It's damaged her floors, disrupted her life. Sounds like a housekeeping issue, Rusty shot back. I'm paying what I owe. Maybe her fancy boyfriends can buy her a new vacuum. The gallery snickered. Grayson's face reddened. Enough, Mr. Malone. This court won't tolerate your antics. I'm finding you in contempt. 90 days in county, effective immediately. And from now on, payments will be by check or wire, or I'll extend your sentence. Understood? Rusty met his glare. You're the boss, Judge, but you might want to check your email later. Could be interesting. Grayson's eyes narrowed, but he banged the gavel. Bailiff, take him away. As Rusty was cuffed, he caught Evelyn's smirk. She thought she'd won. She had no idea what was coming. Chapter 2. The River Runs, Deep Shelby County Jail was a concrete hellhole off Poplar Avenue, a maze of rusted bars and flickering lights. Rusty was processed, stripped, searched, and shoved into an orange jumpsuit, then led to a cell block reeking of sweat and bleach. He kept his head down, sizing up the inmates. At his size, most wouldn't mess with him, but he knew better than to relax. He'd done a stint in juvie back in the 90s for boosting cars in Whitehaven, so he understood the rules. Watch your back, pick your allies, and don't show fear. That night, as he ate watery chili against a wall, a voice cut through the din. Rusty Malone? Shit, man. Thought that was you. Rusty turned to see a wiry guy with a shaved head and a scar across his cheek. Dwayne Knox Jackson, a buddy from his Fraser days. They'd run together as teens, pulling small-time hustles before Rusty went straight. Knox clapped him on the shoulder. What's a big shot like you doing in here? Told a judge to shove it, Rusty said, grinning. You? Caught with a pound of weed in Millington. 6 months. Knox shrugged. So, what's your play? Got 90 days unless I kiss Grayson's ass. Ain't happening. But I've got something cooking outside. My ex and her crew are about to eat dirt. Knox chuckled. Still the same old Rusty? Need any help in here? Maybe. Got a few names I might need tracked down. Guards and some punks who might get ideas. Say less. I've got your back. They ate, catching up on old times, stealing hubcaps off Union Avenue, racing bikes down Elvis Presley Boulevard. Knox promised to spread the word. Rusty wasn't to be messed with. It was a start. Back in his cell, Rusty lay on the thin mattress, staring at the ceiling. He thought of Clara, stuck in Germantown with Evelyn, probably miserable at that snooty private school, St. Agnes Academy. She'd begged to live with him during the divorce, but Grayson wouldn't hear it. Rusty's plan wasn't just about revenge, it was about getting her back. He'd make sure she had a home to return to, even if he had to burn half of Memphis to do it. Chapter 2. The River Runs Deep. The Shelby County Jail squatted like a gray beast on Poplar Avenue, its walls stained with decades of Memphis grit and desperation. Rusty Malone stepped into the cell block, the clang of the steel door echoing behind him like a judge's gavel. The air was thick with the stench of unwashed bodies, cheap disinfectant, and the faint tang of metal. At 6 feet 3 inches and 240 pounds, he moved with the quiet confidence of a man who'd faced worse than this. South Memphis street fights, a stint in juvie for hot wiring a Chevy in Whitehaven, and years of hauling drywall to flip houses along the Mississippi River. But he wasn't here to flex. He was here to survive and to win. The cell block was a zoo, men shouting over card games, others pacing like caged dogs, their eyes darting to size up the new guy. Rusty kept his head low but his shoulders squared, scanning the room. He'd learned the game early. Don't start trouble, but don't back down if it finds you. His orange jumpsuit itched against his skin, a far cry from the flannel shirts he wore working properties in Midtown. He carried a thin mattress and a scratchy blanket to a bunk in the corner, claiming it with a nod to the skinny kid already there, who didn't argue. Dinner came an hour later, a tray of watery chili, a stale roll, and a cup of Kool-Aid that tasted like regret. Rusty grabbed his share and leaned against the wall, eating slow, his eyes flicking over the crowd. Most inmates stuck to their cliques, The Aryan Brotherhood types with shaved heads and swastika ink. The black gangbangers from Fraser flashing hand signs, and a scattering of loners who looked like they'd snap if you breathed too loud. He wasn't worried about his size keeping him safe. Big guys got targeted just to prove a point. He needed allies, and fast. A voice cut through the noise, rough as gravel. "Rusty Malone? Shit, man. Thought that was you." Rusty turned, spoon halfway to his mouth, and saw a wiry figure striding over. Dwayne Knox Jackson, a ghost from his teenage years. Knox was shorter than Rusty, maybe 5'10", with a shaved head and a jagged scar slicing across his left cheek from a bar fight in Millington years back. They'd run together in Fraser, boosting car stereos off Union Avenue and racing dirt bikes down Elvis Presley Boulevard until the cops chased them into the woods. Knox had a grin like a fox, all teeth and mischief, and Rusty couldn't help but match it. "Knox, you ugly bastard," Rusty said, setting his tray down. They clasped hands, right fists locked, left arms pulling into a quick bro hug that rattled the chains of memory. "What's a punk like you doing in here?" "Caught with a pound of weed up in Millington," Knox said, shrugging like it was no big deal. 6 months unless I snitch, which I ain't." "You?" "Told a judge to shove it," Rusty replied, leaning back against the wall. 90 days, maybe more if I don't kiss his ass." Knox laughed, a sharp bark that turned a few heads. "Still the same old Rusty, always swinging at the big dogs." "Big dogs bleed too," Rusty said, his voice low. "Got something cooking outside, though. My ex and her crew, they're about to eat dirt." Knox's eyes lit up, the scar twitching as he grinned wider. "Oh, I gotta hear this. What's the play?" Rusty glanced around, making sure no one was too close. "Evelyn, my ex, she's a partner at Grayson Holt, downtown. Cheated with half the firm, got custody of my girl Clara, and stuck me with $7 grand a month in support. Judge Grayson's in her pocket, maybe her bed too. I've got footage, embezzlement, bribes, her screwing some city councilman from East Memphis, hidden cameras, cash to a cleaning crew, the works. My brother Tommy's dropping it online today, noon sharp. Taglines don't cross the river." Knox whistled low. "Damn, man, that's a nuke. You're in here when it hits." "Best alibi there is," Rusty said, smirking. "Can't pin it on me when I'm locked up." "Smart? Real smart." Knox scratched his chin, then leaned in. "Need anything in here?" 90 days ain't a picnic, especially if Grayson's got friends." "Maybe," Rusty said, finishing his chili and tossing the tray aside. "Got a few names I might need tracked. Guards, inmates who might get ideas." "You still got that nose for sniffing out trouble?" "Like a bloodhound," Knox said. "Say less. I've got your back. Been here 3 months. Know the players. That guard over there." He jerked his head toward a beefy guy with a buzz cut by the door. "Name's Carter. Takes bribes to look the other way. The skinny one with the mustache, Lopez. He's straight, but he's soft. Inmates. Watch the big dude with the neck tat. Calls himself Rhino. Runs with the Aryans, loves picking fights." "Good to know," Rusty said, filing it away. "Spread the word I'm not here to start shit, but I'll finish it." "Done," Knox said. "Man, it's good to see you. Takes me back. Remember that time we jacked that Pontiac off Danny Thomas Boulevard? Cops had us pinned until you floored it through Overton Park." Rusty chuckled. "Yeah, and you pissed yourself when we ditched it by the river." "Did not," Knox shot back, laughing. "Okay, maybe a little." They talked through dinner, the noise of the block fading into a hum. Knox filled him in on the jail's rhythm. Chow at 6 p.m., lockdown at 9, yard time if you didn't piss off the guards. He promised to introduce Rusty to a couple of guys he trusted. Street kids from Raleigh who'd watch his blind spots. It wasn't a crew, not yet, but it was a start. When the guards barked for lights out, Rusty climbed onto his bunk, the springs creaking under his weight. The kid below him, some twitchy 19-year-old named Petey, muttered a quiet night and went silent. Rusty stared at the cracked ceiling, the fluorescent glow from the hall seeping through the bars. He pictured Clara stuck in that Germantown mansion with Evelyn, probably hating every second at St. Agnes Academy. She'd begged to live with him during the divorce, her brown eyes, his eyes pleading as she clutched his arm in the courthouse hallway. "Dad, I don't want to stay with her. She doesn't even care about me." But Grayson had waved her off like she was nothing, giving Evelyn full custody and saddling Rusty with the bill. He clenched his fists, knuckles whitening. This wasn't just about Evelyn or Grayson. It was about Clara. She deserved better than a mother who'd traded family for status, better than a judge who'd sold out for a piece of tail. The videos would hit in. He checked the clock on the wall. 12 hours ago. Noon had come and gone while he was being processed. By now, Twitter would be ablaze. News crews from WREG and WMC swarming Grayson and Holt's sleek office on Front Street. Evelyn's face would be plastered across every screen from Memphis to Nashville, her pristine life unraveling thread by thread. Rusty's plan had deeper roots than spite. He'd bought the Mud Island house cash 10 years ago, a fixer-upper he'd turned into a home with hardwood floors and a porch overlooking the river. Evelyn had hated it, too small, too South Side, and forced them into the Germantown monstrosity, a $1.2 million McMansion financed with a jumbo loan he'd reluctantly co-signed. After the divorce, he'd moved back to Mud Island, renting out the upstairs to a quiet nurse from St. Jude's. The Germantown place was Evelyn's problem now, and with the scandal breaking, she'd be scrambling to pay that mortgage. Foreclosure was coming, and Rusty wouldn't lift a finger to stop it. Sleep didn't come easy. The jail was a symphony of snores, coughs, and the occasional shout from a guy losing it down the hall. Rusty's mind churned. Tommy would have uploaded the files from his cramped apartment in East Nashville, using a VPN to cover his tracks. The cleaners, a crew out of Orange Mound, had planted the cameras months ago, slipping them into Grayson and Holt's conference rooms and private offices for a cool $5,000 in unmarked bills. Rusty had cashed out a rental in Cooper Young to fund it, a sacrifice worth every penny. He thought of his brother, 3 years younger, a skinny kid who dodged their dad's drunken rages thanks to Rusty taking the hits. Tommy had escaped to Tennessee Tech, studying computers while Rusty stayed in Memphis, buying his first tax-foreclosed house at 21. They'd always had each other's backs, and now Tommy was the linchpin, Rusty's eyes and hands beyond these walls. A guard's flashlight swept the cell, the beam catching Rusty's face. "Eyes shut. Malone," Carter growled. The bribe-taker Knox had pointed out. Rusty didn't flinch, just closed his eyes and let the darkness take him. Tomorrow he'd start working the block, feeling out who he could trust beyond Knox. 90 days was a long damn time, and Grayson wouldn't let this slide. The judge had pull, cops, guards, maybe even inmates on his payroll. Rusty had to stay sharp. As he drifted off, the Mississippi River loomed in his mind, wide and muddy, cutting through Memphis like a scar. It was his line in the sand. Evelyn and Grayson had crossed it, and now the current was pulling them under. Don't cross the river, he thought, a mantra from his South Side roots. They'd learn soon enough. Chapter 3, The Flood Begins. The second day in Shelby County Jail dawned gray and sticky, the kind of Memphis morning where the humidity seeped through the concrete walls and made everything feel heavier. Rusty Malone woke to the clang of metal trays and the low growl of inmates shuffling toward breakfast. His bunk creaked as he swung his legs down, the thin mattress offering no comfort to his 240-pound frame. Petey, the twitchy kid below, was already up, muttering to himself about oatmeal like it was a death sentence. Rusty ignored him, stretching his shoulders and cracking his neck. He'd slept light, half expecting trouble after his chat with Knox, but the night had passed quiet. Too quiet. Maybe. Breakfast was a slop of watery oats and a bruised apple, served in the chow hall under the watchful eyes of guards Carter and Lopez. Rusty grabbed his tray and found Knox at a table near the back, flanked by 2 guys he'd mentioned last night. Rico and Jamal, street kids from Raleigh, both in their early 20s with lean builds and wary eyes. They nodded at Rusty as he sat, a silent acknowledgement that Knox had vouched for him. "Word's out," Knox said, keeping his voice low over the hum of the room. "Carter was on the phone last night, pissed about something. Bet it's your little surprise." Rusty smirked, biting into the apple. Videos should have hit by now. Tommy's got them on X, Reddit, everywhere, tagged "Don't Cross the River." Grayson and Evelyn are probably losing their minds. Jamal, a lanky kid with a fade haircut, leaned in. Heard some guards talking about a law firm downtown going crazy. That your ex's place? Grayson and Holt. Front Street, Rusty confirmed. She's a partner. Or was Rico, shorter and stockier, with a scar above his eyebrow, chuckled. Man, you don't play. What's in the vids? Enough to sink 'em, Rusty said. Embezzlement. Millions skimmed from client funds. Bribes to city officials for zoning deals in East Memphis. And Evelyn banging a councilman in the conference room, plus Grayson getting cozy with her in his office. Hidden cams caught it all. Knox whistled. Damn, Rusty. You're a one-man wrecking crew. How'd you pull that off? Cash and favors, Rusty said. Paid a cleaning crew from Orange Mound to plant the gear. Tommy scrubbed the footage, made it untraceable. Dropped it yesterday at noon. The table went quiet for a second, the weight of it sinking in. Rusty's plan wasn't just revenge. It was a calculated strike, a South Side middle finger to the polished North Side elites who'd screwed him. He'd spent a year building it, every move precise, every dollar from his rental properties in Cooper Young funneled into the hit. Now it was live, and he was in here, untouchable. Grayson's got pull, though, Knox warned, glancing at Carter across the room. Might send some heat your way. Rhino's been eyeing you, too. Big Aryan asshole with the neck tat. Loves a target. Let him try, Rusty said, his voice flat. I've handled worse. Breakfast ended with a barked order to clear out. Rusty dumped his tray and followed the herd to the yard, a cracked asphalt square penned in by chain link and razor wire. The sun was climbing, baking the ground, and the air buzzed with flies. He stuck close to Knox, Rico, and Jamal, watching the cliques form, Aryans by the weights, gangbangers shooting hoops, loners pacing the edges. Rhino loomed near the bench press, a 6'5" slab of muscle, with a shaved head and a swastika inked across his throat. His eyes locked on Rusty, a predator sizing up prey. Trouble, Knox muttered. Expected it, Rusty replied, rolling his shoulders. Grayson's dogs don't waste time. Rhino lumbered over, flanked by two skinheads with buzz cuts and dead stares. He stopped a foot from Rusty, reeking of sweat and cheap tobacco. You Malone? Who's asking? Rusty said, meeting his gaze. Friend of a friend, Rhino sneered. Heard you're stirring shit outside. Judge ain't happy. Judge can cry me a river, Rusty said. What's your angle? Rhino cracked his knuckles, a slow grin spreading. Angle's simple. You're a big guy, but I'm bigger. Step out of line, I'll break you. Rusty didn't flinch. Try it. See how far you get. The yard tensed, inmates turning to watch, guards pretending not to notice. Knox stepped up beside Rusty, Rico and Jamal fanning out, a silent line drawn. Rhino's grin faltered. He hadn't expected backup. Before he could swing, Carter's whistle cut the air. Break it up, the guard bellowed, striding over. Malone, Jackson, back inside, now. Rhino smirked as Rusty turned away, but the message was clear. He wasn't untouchable. Carter escorted them back to the block, his jaw tight, saying nothing. Rusty caught the guard's glance. Nervous, angry. The videos were hitting harder than he'd thought. Back in the cell, Rusty paced, adrenaline still pumping. Knox leaned against the bars, smirking. You've got a death wish, man. Nah, Rusty said. Just don't bend over for nobody. An hour later, a guard, not Carter, but Lopez, the soft one, called Rusty's name. Visitor. Rusty swapped a look with Knox, who shrugged. Could be good, could be bad. The visitation room was a sterile box off the main hall, all scratched plexiglass and metal chairs bolted to the floor. Rusty sat, cuffs digging into his wrists, and waited. The door buzzed, and in walked Evelyn, blonde hair frizzy, makeup smudged, a far cry from the polished lawyer who'd gutted him in court. She looked like she'd aged 10 years since yesterday. What the hell did you do, Jack? She snapped, slamming her purse on the counter. Morning to you too, Rusty said, leaning back. What's got your panties twisted? You know damn well, she hissed, voice trembling. Those videos, my firm's a circus. Reporters everywhere, clients pulling out. I got fired this morning. Fired, because of you. Rusty let a slow grin spread. Sounds rough. How's Grayson holding up? Her eyes flashed. Don't play dumb. You ruined us. The house, Germantown's going into foreclosure. I can't pay the mortgage without my job. You have to help me." He laughed, a hard, bitter sound. "Help you? After you screwed me over? Took Clara? Bled me dry? Nah, Evelyn. You made your bed. Lie in it. Maybe your councilman can chip in." She flinched, tears welling up. "This isn't a game, Jack. I've got nothing left. Clara's miserable. She hates me now, won't even talk to me. You've turned her against me." "Clara's smart," Rusty said, voice cold. "She sees you for what you are. Don't blame me for that." Evelyn's hands shook as she gripped the edge of the counter. "I need money, spousal support, something. The bank's calling every day. I'll lose everything." "You've got your fancy degree," Rusty said. "Figure it out. I'm in here. Can't write checks from a jail cell. Guess you'll have to slum it like the rest of us." She stared at him, disbelief morphing into rage. "You're a bastard, you know that? South Side trash. Always will be." "Proud of it," Rusty shot back. "Better than a North Side snake. Tell Grayson I said hi. He's probably sweating worse than you." Evelyn stood, snatching her purse. "This isn't over. You'll pay for this." She stormed out, heels clicking like gunfire on the tile. Rusty sat back, the grin fading. He hadn't expected her to crack so fast. The videos were working. Grayson and Holt was bleeding, and Evelyn was drowning. But Clara weighed on him. Evelyn keeping her away hurt more than any contempt charge. Back in the block, Knox was waiting. "Who was it?" "Evelyn," Rusty said, dropping onto his bunk. "Fired, broke, begging for cash. House is toast." Knox laughed. "You're a damn hurricane, Rusty. What's next?" "Clara," Rusty said, staring at the ceiling. "Gotta get her out of there. Evelyn's falling apart. Might drag her down too." "Got a plan?" Knox asked. "Always," Rusty said. "Tommy's next move. Hit their families. Grayson's got a wife in Collierville. Councilman's got a girlfriend in Bartlett. Little pressure? They'll crack faster." Knox raised an eyebrow. "Rough play. You sure?" "They crossed the river," Rusty said, voice like steel. "Now they swim." That night, trouble found him. Lights out hit at 9 p.m. The block plunging into shadow. Rusty was half asleep when the cell door clicked open. Unusual for lockdown. Footsteps padded in, 6 shadows against the dim hall light. He bolted upright as Rhino's bulk filled the frame. 5 Aryans behind him, shanks glinting in their hands. "Time's up, Malone," Rhino growled. "Judge says hi." Rusty rolled off the bunk, feet hitting the floor, fists clenched. Petey yelped and scrambled under his mattress like a rat. The first skinhead lunged, shank aimed at Rusty's gut. He sidestepped, grabbing the guy's wrist and twisting until it snapped, the blade clattering to the concrete. A second swung, catching Rusty's arm with a shallow slice. Hot pain flared, but he roared, slamming his elbow into the guy's nose. Blood sprayed. Rhino charged, a freight train of muscle, tackling Rusty into the wall. The air whooshed out of him, but he drove a knee into Rhino's gut, doubling him over. Another shank grazed his ribs, and he spun, hurling the attacker into the bunk frame. Metal rang like a bell. The 5th guy hesitated, and that was his mistake. Rusty grabbed his throat, slamming him to the ground. Shouts echoed down the block. Boots pounded. Guards, finally. Rhino wheezed, clutching his stomach, as Carter and Lopez burst in, batons swinging. "Back off!" Carter yelled, dragging the Aryans out one by one. Rusty stood, panting, blood dripping from his arm and side, the cell a wreck of twisted bodies and smeared red. Lopez hauled him to the infirmary, cuffs back on, muttering about paperwork. The nurse, a tired woman named Beth with gray streaks in her hair, patched him up, stitching the cuts without a word. "You're a magnet for trouble, Malone," she said finally, taping gauze over his ribs. "Trouble finds me," Rusty replied, wincing as she worked. "Grayson's doing?" She shrugged. "Don't know, don't care. Keep your head down, or next time it's the morgue." Back in a holding cell, Rusty sat alone, the adrenaline crash leaving him wired. Rhino's crew had been sent by Grayson, no doubt about it. The judge was rattled, lashing out through his jailhouse dogs. But Rusty had survived, and that sent a message too. He thought of Knox. Where the hell had he been? Locked in his own cell, probably unable to help. The next morning, Knox found him in the chow hall, eyes wide. Heard what happened. Rhino's boys jumped you? Yeah, Rusty said, flexing his bandaged arm. Grayson's orders. Took 5 of them to try me. Knox grinned. And you're still breathing. Word's spreading. Nobody's touching you now. Good, Rusty said. Tell Tommy to move fast. Hit their families today. Wives, girlfriends, whatever they've got. Make it loud. Knox nodded, a glint in his eye. River's rising. Huh? Flood's here, Rusty said, voice dark. Let's see who drowns. Chapter 4. A Daughter's Stand. The infirmary at Shelby County Jail smelled of antiseptic and despair, a faint tang of blood lingering beneath the sterile sheen. Rusty Malone sat on a cot, his arm and ribs freshly bandaged, the stitches pulling tight every time he shifted. It was day 3 of his 90-day sentence, and the attack from Rhino's crew last night had left him bruised but unbroken. Beth, the gray-streaked nurse, had warned him to keep his head down, but Rusty wasn't built for ducking. He'd grown up scrapping on the cracked sidewalks of South Memphis, and he'd learned young that you either stand tall or get buried. The holding cell they'd stuck him in after the fight was a 6x8 box with a steel bench and a flickering bulb. He paced it like a caged bear, replaying Evelyn's visit yesterday. She'd cracked faster than he'd expected. Fired from Grayson and Holt, the Germantown mansion teetering on foreclosure, her perfect life unraveling like a cheap suit. It felt good, damn good, but Clara haunted him. Evelyn was keeping her away, probably poisoning her mind with lies about how Daddy was a lowlife who'd ruined everything. Rusty's jaw tightened. He'd get her back no matter what it took. A guard's voice broke his thoughts. Malone, visitor! It was Lopez, the soft one with the mustache, looking nervous as he unlocked the door. Rusty stood, cuffs clinking as Lopez led him back to the visitation room. He expected Evelyn again, maybe begging harder this time, or Grayson himself, red-faced and threatening. But when the door buzzed open, it wasn't either of them. Clara stood there, 16 years old, brown hair pulled into a messy ponytail, her hazel eyes wide with a mix of relief and fury. She wore a St. Agnes Academy blazer, the Germantown private school Evelyn had forced her into, but it hung loose like she didn't belong in it. Behind her was a woman Rusty didn't recognize. Mid-40s, short auburn hair, glasses perched on her nose, carrying a leather satchel. She had the steady look of a teacher or a shrink, someone who'd seen trouble and didn't flinch. Dad! Clara rushed the plexiglass, pressing her hands against it as Rusty sat, mirroring her on his side. The cuffs scraped the counter. Clara, baby, Rusty said, voice catching. How'd you get here? Where's your mom? She doesn't know, Clara said, glancing at the woman beside her. This is Miss Maggie, Margaret Tate. She's my English teacher from Midtown High before Mom yanked me out. She drove me from Germantown. Rusty eyed Maggie, who gave a small nod. Mr. Malone, I've been helping Clara since she transferred to St. Agnes. She's been struggling, grades slipping, fights with her mom. She tracked me down last week, said she needed to see you. Thanks for bringing her, Rusty said, his tone wary but grateful. What's going on, kiddo? Clara's eyes welled up, but her voice was steel. I hate it there, Dad. Mom's a mess. Screaming about money, the house, you. Those videos hit yesterday. Everyone at school's talking. Kids call me the lawyer's slut daughter. She's locked me in that stupid mansion like I'm a prisoner. Rusty's fists clenched, the cuffs biting into his wrists. She's keeping you from me. Yeah, Clara said, wiping her face. Says you're dangerous, a criminal. But I know the truth. She's the one who screwed up. I saw her with that guy, Dad, before the divorce. Some slick-haired jerk in a Lexus, kissing her in the driveway. She didn't even care I was home. Rage flared in Rusty's chest, hot and sharp. He'd caught Evelyn too, tracked her phone to a condo on Riverside Drive. But hearing it from Clara made it real, raw. I'm sorry you had to see that, baby. She's going to pay for it. She already is, Clara said, a faint smirk breaking through. Her firm's toast. TV crews were outside this morning. WREG, WMC, even some Nashville station. She's freaking out. Good, Rusty said, leaning forward. But what's your plan? You can't stay with her if she's falling apart. Clara exchanged a look with Maggie, who cleared her throat. That's why we're here, Mr. Malone. Clara wants out, legally. I've been researching emancipation laws in Tennessee. At 16, with a stable plan and a judge's approval, she can petition to be an adult. She'd need a place to live, income, proof she's better off without Evelyn. Rusty's mind raced. Emancipation? You're sure about this, Clara? Dead sure, she said, chin up. I hate St. Agnes. Those rich kids treat me like trash, 'cause I'm not from East Memphis. I want to go back to Midtown High, live on Mud Island with you. Miss Maggie says the house is yours, right? Not Mom's? Yeah, Rusty said. Bought it cash years ago. Germantown's hers. She dragged me into that loan. It's foreclosing, but Mud Island's safe. I've got a tenant upstairs, nurse from St. Jude's, but downstairs is ours. Maggie nodded, pulling a notepad from her satchel. That helps. If Clara can show she's got a home and support, yours once you're out, she's got a shot. Problem is Evelyn's custody order. We'd need to move fast before she tightens her grip. Rusty rubbed his jaw, the stubble rasping. I'm stuck in here 87 more days unless Grayson piles on. Can't do much from a cell. You don't have to, Clara said, eyes fierce. Ms. Maggie's got a lawyer friend in Midtown. Pro bono. I've been saving cash from babysitting in Germantown, and Uncle Tommy texted me yesterday. Said he's got my back. I just need your okay, Dad. Rusty's throat tightened. Clara was his kid through and through. Tough, smart, South Side stubborn. You've got it, baby. Whatever you need. Tommy's in Nashville. He's running the show outside. Tell him to wire you money from my rentals. Cooper Young, Overton Square, wherever's liquid. Maggie scribbled notes. That'll strengthen her case. I'll file the petition this week. Shelby County Juvenile Court. Evelyn's meltdown might sway a judge, especially with the scandal. Grayson'll fight it, Rusty warned. He's got pull, even if he's sweating now. Let him try, Clara said, a spark in her voice. I'm done being her pawn. They talked logistics. Clara crashing with Maggie in Midtown until the petition cleared. Tommy funneling cash through a trust, the Mud Island house as her anchor. Rusty hated being sidelined, but Clara's fire lit something in him. She wasn't just escaping. She was fighting, like he'd taught her. The visit ended too soon. Clara pressed her hand to the glass again, Rusty matching it. Love you, Dad. Hang in there. Love you too, kiddo, he said. Stay safe. Tell Tommy to hit hard. Grayson's family, the councilman's too. Make 'em squirm. She nodded and Maggie ushered her out. Rusty sat there a minute, the room silent, his pulse steady for the first time in days. Clara was stepping up, and that changed everything. Back in the block, Knox was waiting, Rico and Jamal lounging nearby. Good news? Knox asked, reading Rusty's face. Best kind, Rusty said, dropping onto his bunk. Clara's breaking free. Emancipation. She's coming home to Mud Island. Knox grinned. Hell yeah, your girl's got balls. Takes after me, Rusty said. Evelyn's crumbling. Fired, house going under. Videos did their job. More than that, Rico piped up, glancing at a guard across the hall. Carter's been on edge all morning. Heard him bitching about Grayson. Says the judge is pissed, wants you shut down. Let him come, Rusty said, flexing his bandaged arm. Rhino tried. Didn't work. Jamal smirked. Word's spreading. Don't cross the river. Inmates are whispering it. You're a damn legend already. Good, Rusty said. Keep it going. Tell Tommy, through your people outside, to hit Grayson's wife in Collierville, councilman's girl in Bartlett. Today, loud and messy. Knox raised an eyebrow. Families? That's cold, man. They started it, Rusty said, voice like gravel. Crossed my river, took my kid. Now they pay. Knox nodded. No argue there. I'll get word out. Got a cousin in Fraser. Runs with a crew. He'll relay it. The day dragged. Yard time. Chow. Lockdown. Rusty kept his eyes peeled, but Rhino and his goons stayed clear, licking their wounds. Carter glared from a distance, but Lopez steered him away, muttering about reports. The block buzzed with tension, inmates watching Rusty like he was a storm rolling in. That night, he lay awake. The jail's noises a dull roar. Snoring, coughing, a guy yelling nonsense down the hall. He pictured Clara with Maggie, plotting her escape from Evelyn's gilded cage. Mud Island loomed in his mind. The little house on the riverbank where he'd raised her, barbecues on the porch, her riding her bike down Harbor Town's quiet streets. Evelyn had hated it, called it a shack compared to Germantown's sprawling estates. She'd forced them north, chasing status, and now she was losing it all. A clatter woke him at dawn, guards banging trays, shouting for breakfast. Rusty rolled out, stiffness aching in his bones, and joined the line. Knox slid in beside him, voice low. "Cousin got the message to Tommy. It's done." "Details," Rusty said, grabbing oatmeal. "Grayson's wife, Collierville," Knox murmured. "Tommy's crew slashed her tires, spray-painted 'Don't cross the river' on her Mercedes in her driveway. Cops showed up, big scene. Councilman's girl in Bartlett, her apartment got trashed, windows smashed, same tagline. Words hitting X, people connecting it to the law firm mess." Rusty's grin was feral. "Perfect. They'll feel it now." Chow Hall was abuzz, inmates whispering, guards twitchy. Carter stormed over mid-meal, face red. "Malone, you think you're slick? Shit's hitting the fan outside. Grayson's losing his mind." "Don't know what you're talking about," Rusty said, spooning oatmeal. "I've been here, eating this slop." Carter leaned close, breath sour. "Keep playing dumb. You'll slip and I'll be there." "Looking forward to it," Rusty said, meeting his stare. Carter huffed and stalked off, Lopez trailing like a nervous puppy. Knox chuckled. "You've got 'em rattled, man. What's next?" "Clara's move," Rusty said. "She gets free, I've won half the fight. Then I finish Grayson. Judge or not, he's done." The day stretched. Yard time under a blazing sun, Rhino glaring from the weights but keeping distance. Rusty worked the block, nodding to inmates who'd heard the whispers, building his rep. "Don't cross the river" was catching, a warning and a promise. Late afternoon, Lopez called him again. "Visitor." Rusty braced. Evelyn? Grayson? But it was Maggie alone this time, satchel in hand. She looked tired but determined, glasses fogged from the heat. "Clara's safe," she said as Rusty sat. "Filed the petition this morning. Juvenile court downtown. Hearing set for next week. Evelyn's been served." Rusty exhaled, tension easing. "She fighting it?" "Hard," Maggie said. "Her lawyer, some Holt guy, called me, yelling about interference. But Clara's solid. Tommy sent $5,000 from your rentals. She's got a trust started for Mud Island. I'm her temporary guardian till it's ruled." "Good," Rusty said. "Grayson'll pull strings. Watch for it." "We are," Maggie said, adjusting her glasses. "Clara's tough, Mr. Malone. She's your kid, won't back down." "Call me Rusty," he said, a faint smile breaking through. "Thanks, Maggie, for everything." She nodded. "South Side sticks together. I grew up in Whitehaven. Know how it works." The visit ended, and Rusty walked back, lighter. Clara was fighting, Maggie was solid, Tommy was striking. The river was rising, and Evelyn's world was flooding fast. That night he slept deep, dreaming of Mud Island, Clara on the porch, the Mississippi rolling by. 86 days left, but the tide was turning. Chapter 5. The Reckoning. The fifth day in Shelby County Jail broke with a rumble of thunder over Memphis, the sky outside the barred windows churning gray and mean. Rusty Malone woke to the sound, his bunk creaking as he sat up, the stitches in his arm and ribs itching under the bandages. The air was thick, heavy with the promise of rain, and it matched the storm brewing inside him. Clara's emancipation hearing was a week away. Evelyn was cracking, and Grayson was cornered. The videos had done their damage. Grayson and Holt was a sinking ship, and the tagline, "Don't cross the river," was echoing from South Memphis to the newsrooms of Nashville. But Rusty knew cornered dogs bite hardest, and he wasn't out of the woods yet. Breakfast was the usual slop, grits and a rubbery sausage link, but the chow hall buzzed with a new edge. Inmates whispered, eyes flicking to Rusty as he sat with Knox, Rico, and Jamal. Word of the attack from Rhino's crew had spread, and last night's update from Knox, Tommy hitting Grayson's wife and the councilman's girlfriend, had lit a fire. Rusty was no longer just the new guy. He was a name, a force, a South Side legend carving his mark in this concrete hell. Carter's been on the horn all morning, Knox said, keeping his voice low over the clatter of trays. Heard him yelling about Grayson. Judge wants your head. Man, let him come, Rusty said, spearing the sausage with his plastic fork. Rhino tried. Didn't stick. Jamal grinned, his fade catching the light. You're untouchable now, bro. Aryans are pissed, but they're scared. Don't cross the river. They're saying it like a damn prayer. Good, marked, Rusty said. Fear's a weapon. Grayson's feeling it too. Wife's car trashed in Collierville. Councilman's girl running scared in Bartlett. Tommy's crew tagged it loud. Cops can't pin it on me in here. Rico leaned in, scar glinting above his brow. Heard the news last night. WREG ran a piece on the firm. Clients jumping ship, feds sniffing around. Your ex is toast. She came begging yesterday, Rusty said, a grim smile tugging his lips. Fired, house foreclosing. Wanted cash. Told her to shove it. Knox laughed, a sharp bark. You're a cold son of a bitch, Rusty. What's the next hit? Clara, Rusty said, voice dropping. Hearings next week. Juvenile court. Maggie's got her covered. Tommy's funding it. Once she's free, I've got half the win. Then I bury Grayson for good. The meal ended with a guard's shout, and the block shuffled to the yard. Rain spit from the sky, turning the asphalt slick. But the inmates didn't care. Yard time was freedom, even under razor wire. Rusty stuck with his crew, watching Rhino and his Aryans huddle by the weights, their glares sharp but distant. Carter paced the perimeter, radio crackling, his buzz-cut head swiveling toward Rusty every few minutes. Trouble was brewing, and Rusty felt it in his bones. Mid-morning, Lopez called him out. Malone, video room, now! Knox swapped a look with him. Grayson? Probably, Rusty said, standing. Time to dance. The video room was a cramped booth off the main hall, a flickering screen mounted on the wall, a guard posted outside. Rusty sat, cuffs off for once, and waited. The screen buzzed to life, and there was Harold Grayson, red-faced, tie askew, sitting in what looked like his chambers downtown. His eyes burned through the feed, a cornered animal in a suit. Malone, Grayson spat, voice crackling. You think you're clever, don't you? Morning, Judge, Rusty said, leaning back. Rough day. Don't play with me, Grayson snapped. Those videos. You're doing. My firm's in chaos. My wife's a wreck. The bar's investigating. You've gone too far. Rusty shrugged, casual as a Sunday drive. Been in here 4 days, Judge. Locked up tight. Whatever's happening out there ain't my hands. You've got people, Grayson said, leaning closer, veins bulging in his neck. That river nonsense, spray painted on my wife's car. I know it's you. Sounds like a coincidence, Rusty said, grinning. Lots of rivers in Tennessee, Mississippi, Cumberland, Tennessee. Maybe someone's just mad at you. Grayson slammed a fist on his desk, the sound tinny through the speakers. I'll bury you, Malone. 90 days won't be enough. I'll extend it. Contempt on contempt. You'll rot in there. Go ahead, Rusty said, voice like steel. Pile it on. Won't change a thing. Your ship's sinking. Clients gone, feds knocking, wife probably packing her bags. How's that divorce looking? Grayson's face twisted, a snarl breaking free. You're scum, Malone. Southside filth. I'll make sure Clara stays with Evelyn. Your little girl won't see you till she's 30. That hit hard. Rusty's grin faded, his fist clenching under the table. Threaten my kid again, Judge, and you'll wish you'd stayed in your lane. Corner a dog, you get bit. Is that a threat? Grayson hissed. Just an old saying, Rusty said, eyes cold. But I'd watch your back. People out there don't like you much right now. Grayson opened his mouth, but Rusty cut him off. Oh, and tell Evelyn her councilman's next. Bartlett's a small town. Word travels fast. The judge's face went purple, and the screen cut to black. Rusty sat there, pulse hammering, a dark satisfaction settling in. He'd rattled Grayson good, pushed him to the edge. The guard outside, Lopez, looked spooked as he led Rusty back, saying nothing. In the block, Knox was waiting. How'd it go? Grayson's losing it, Rusty said, dropping onto his bunk. Threatened to keep me in longer, keep Clara from me. I told him to watch his ass. Knox smirked. You're a damn bull, Rusty. What now? Tommy, Rusty said, tell your cousin, hit harder. Grayson's house, councilman's office. Burn it down if they have to. I want 'em begging. On it, Knox said, slipping off to relay the message through his Fraser pipeline. The day stretched tense, rain pounding the roof, guards on edge, inmates restless. Rusty kept his crew close, sensing the shift. Carter avoided him, but Rhino's glares sharpened, his Aryans whispering. Something was coming. It hit that night. Lockdown came at 9 p.m., the block dimming to shadows. Rusty was on his bunk, Petey snoring below, when the cell door clicked open again. Second time in a week, a bad sign. 7 figures slipped in, Rhino at the front, shanks gleaming, faces hard. No words this time, just violence. Rusty rolled off the bunk as Rhino swung, a blade slicing air where his throat had been. He tackled the big man, slamming him into the wall, concrete rattling. A shank caught his shoulder, hot blood spilling, but he roared, smashing Rhino's face with a fist. Bone crunched, and the Aryan howled. 2 more piled on, fists and steel raining down. Rusty fought like a trapped animal. Knees, elbows, headbutts, cracking ribs, breaking noses. Petey screamed, cowering under his bunk. The block erupted, shouts, banging trays, chaos masking the fight. Rusty took a shank to the thigh, pain searing, but he grabbed the attacker's arm, snapping it over his knee. Rhino staggered up, blood streaming from his nose, and charged again. Rusty ducked, hurling him into the bunk frame. Metal groaned, and Rhino crumpled. Guards stormed in, Carter leading, baton swinging. Enough! He bellowed, cracking skulls. Rusty dropped, panting, blood pooling under him, the Aryans scattered and groaning. Lopez dragged him out, cuffs snapping on, and hauled him back to the infirmary. Beth was there, swearing under her breath as she stitched him up. Shoulder, thigh, a dozen cuts and bruises. You're gonna die in here, Malone, she said, hands steady. Not yet, Rusty grunted, wincing as the needle bit. Grayson's dogs, second try. He's desperate. Desperate's dangerous, Beth said, taping gauze. Stay alive till morning at least. Back in holding, Rusty sat, blood drying on his jumpsuit, adrenaline fading to a dull ache. Rhino's crew was beaten, but Grayson wouldn't stop. The judge was a drowning man clutching a knife, and Rusty was the lifeline he wanted to cut. Morning brought Knox, wide-eyed in the chow hall. Jesus, man, you look like hell. 7 on 1? Yeah, Rusty said, limping to the table. Grayson's orders. They're out of moves. Tommy hit again, Knox said, voice low. Grayson's house in Collierville. Torch the garage, river tag on the lawn. Councilman's office in Bartlett. Smashed up, files trashed. X is exploding. Feds raided Grayson and Holt this morning. Rusty's grin was bloody. Perfect, they're done. A guard cut in. Lopez again. Malone, visitor? Rusty hobbled to the room, expecting Maggie with news on Clara. But it was Evelyn, pale, disheveled, eyes red from crying. She sat, clutching a crumpled tissue, looking like a ghost of the woman who'd gutted him. Jack, she whispered, voice breaking. Stop this, please. Stop what? Rusty said, sitting stiffly, pain flaring with every move. You know, she said, tears spilling. The videos, the attacks, Grayson's house, Paul's office. I've got nothing left. Firm's gone, house is gone. Clara's filing to leave me. I'm begging you. Rusty stared, cold and unyielding. You begged yesterday. Didn't work then, won't now. You crossed the river, Evelyn. This is what happens. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she sobbed. The affair, the divorce. I just wanted more, Jack. I'm sorry. Too late, he said. You took Clara, bled me dry, sicked Grayson on me. Sorry, don't fix that. She buried her face in her hands, shoulders shaking. What do I do? I've got no job, no home. Bank took Germantown yesterday. Clara hates me. Move back to Tupelo, Rusty said, voice flat. Start over. Leave Clara with me. She's done with you. Evelyn looked up, wrecked. You can't take her. She's taking herself, Rusty said. Emancipation hearings next week. You're finished. She stood, trembling, and left without another word, the door buzzing shut. Rusty sat, feeling no triumph, just a hollow ache. Revenge was sweet, but Clara's pain wasn't. Back in the block, Knox had news. Clara's hearing. Tommy says it's locked. Maggie's lawyers got proof. Evelyn's collapse. Your rental's funding Clara's trust. Grayson's losing juice. Feds are on him. Good, Rusty said, leaning against the wall, blood seeping through his bandages. One more push. Tell Tommy to leak Grayson's calls. He threatened me yesterday. Video rooms recorded. Bury him. Knox nodded and the day rolled on. Rain hammering, tension thick. That night, Rusty slept light, ready for another hit, but none came. Rhino was in solitary, his crew broken. Carter avoided him, Lopez muttering about investigations. A week later, Maggie visited, beaming behind her glasses. Clara's free, she said as Rusty sat still limping. Hearing was yesterday, juvenile court. Evelyn didn't fight, showed up a mess, judge ruled fast. Clara's emancipated, living with me in Midtown till you're out. Mud Island's hers. Trust is set. Rusty exhaled, a weight lifting. Thank you, Maggie, for everything. She's your kid, Maggie said, smiling. Stubborn as hell. She's back at Midtown High next semester. Hates St. Agnes. South Side through and through, Rusty said, pride swelling. Tell her I love her. 80 days left. I'll be home. Maggie nodded and Rusty walked back, lighter. Clara was safe. Evelyn was down. Grayson was next. The river had flooded and the reckoning was here. Chapter 6. Freedom on the Banks. The rain had stopped by Rusty Malone's 85th day in Shelby County Jail, leaving Memphis slick and gleaming under a late October sun. The air carried the muddy scent of the Mississippi River, a reminder of the line he'd drawn, and the flood he'd unleashed. His stitches had healed to itchy scars, his bruises faded to yellow, and the block had settled into an uneasy respect. Rhino and his Aryans kept their distance, licking wounds from their failed hits, while Carter and Lopez tiptoed around him, caught between Grayson's fading orders and the jailhouse rumor mill chanting, "Don't cross the river." Rusty had become a legend, a Southside titan who'd burned an empire from behind bars. Clara's emancipation was the turning point. A week ago, Maggie's visit had lit a fire in him. His daughter was free, living with her old teacher in Midtown, the Mud Island house secured in a trust funded by his rentals. Evelyn was a ghost, her Germantown mansion foreclosed, her career torched by the videos Tommy had unleashed. Grayson was crumbling too. The feds had raided Grayson and Holt on Front Street, seizing files and freezing assets, while the Bar Association circled like vultures. The judge's threats from the video room, caught on tape and leaked by Tommy, had sealed his fate, a felony intimidation charge looming. Rusty's revenge was complete, but he wasn't out yet. Breakfast that morning was quiet. Oatmeal and a stale biscuit, the chow hall subdued. Knox sat across from him, Rico and Jamal flanking, their alliance solidified through blood and loyalty. 5 days left, man, Knox said, grinning. You walking out a king. Walking out a dad, Rusty corrected, shoving the biscuit aside. Clara's all that matters now. Rest is just noise. Noise that sank a judge, Rico said, smirking. Heard Grayson's wife filed for divorce. Collierville's buzzing. Councilman's girl dumped him too. Good, Rusty said, voice flat. They crossed the river, paid the price. Jamal leaned in, eyes bright. X is still wild. Don't cross the river trending again. News says Grayson might lose his bench. Feds linked him to bribes. Zoning scams in East Memphis. Rusty nodded, satisfaction settling deep. Tommy had played his part. Nashville to Memphis. The kid had turned digital dynamite into a reckoning. The garage fire in Collierville, the trashed office in Bartlett, the leaked calls. It was a symphony of chaos, and Rusty had conducted it from a cell. Mid-morning, Lopez appeared, mustache twitching. Malone, court, today. Knox raised an eyebrow. Grayson? Nah, Rusty said, standing. New judge. Probably Clara's free. Might be the divorce wrap-up. The ride downtown was a blur, cuffs chafing, the van rattling over potholes on Poplar Avenue. The Shelby County Courthouse loomed, its stone facade stern against a blue sky. Rusty was led to a holding room where a public defender, a wiry guy named Ellis with a cheap suit, met him. "Jack Malone?" Ellis said, flipping through papers. "Final hearing. Divorce settlement enforcement. Evelyn's pushing for back spousal support. Says you owe 8 months." Rusty snorted. "She's dreaming. I've been in here. Can't pay from a jail cell. Clara's emancipated. House is foreclosed. What's she got left to squeeze?" Ellis shrugged. "Not much, but she's desperate. New judge. Thompson, not Grayson. He's clean. No ties to the firm. Might cut you loose." The courtroom was half empty, a stark contrast to the circus of his contempt hearing. Rusty sat, cuffs off, scanning the gallery. Clara was there, hair tied back, grinning beside Maggie, who gave a small wave. Evelyn sat up front, hollow-eyed, a shadow of the polished lawyer who'd gutted him. Her suit was wrinkled, her blonde hair limp, a woman unmoored. No lawyer this time. She couldn't afford one. Judge Thompson took the bench, a gray-haired man with a no-nonsense air. He shuffled papers, peering over glasses. "Mr. Malone, Mrs. Malone, let's settle this. 8 months incarcerated, divorce terms in dispute. Mrs. Malone claims unpaid spousal support and mortgage obligations." "Counsel?" Evelyn stood, voice shaky. "Your Honor, Jack owes me $20,000 in spousal support, $2,500 a month for 8 months. The mortgage, too. He stopped paying, and the bank took my house. Germantown's gone because of him." Thompson raised a hand. "Sit, Mrs. Malone. Mr. Ellis?" Ellis cleared his throat. "Your Honor, my client's been incarcerated since August, unable to work or pay. The Germantown property was foreclosed 3 months ago. No loan exists to enforce. Spousal support was $2,500 monthly until the minor child reached adulthood. Clara Malone's emancipated as of last week. Court records confirm. Obligations null. We calculate $17,500 owed for 7 months prior. Jack's prepared to pay $20,000 today. Severance of all ties." Thompson frowned, flipping pages. "Emancipation changes things. Mrs. Malone, your daughter's status?" Evelyn's face crumpled. She left me, Your Honor, filed against me. But Jack still owes. He ruined me." "Ruined?" Rusty cut in, voice sharp. "You cheated, took Clara, bled me dry with Grayson's help. I paid till I couldn't. You're done." "Enough," Thompson snapped, gavel cracking. "I've reviewed the file. Mr. Malone, incarceration halted payments, reasonable. Mrs. Malone, foreclosure negates the mortgage claim. Emancipation ends child-related support as of October 15. 7 months at $2,500 is $17,500. Mr. Malone's offer of $20,000 exceeds that." "Fair?" "No," Evelyn cried, standing again. "He owes more. He destroyed my life. The videos, the attacks." "Sit down," Thompson barked. "No evidence ties Mr. Malone to external acts. He's been detained. I'm closing this. $20,000 settles it. Paid today, no further obligations. Mr. Malone, you're free pending payment confirmation." Ellis nodded. "Wired from his accounts this morning, Your Honor. Cooper Young Rentals." Thompson banged the gavel. "Case closed. Mr. Malone, you're released." Rusty stood, a weight lifting, as deputies uncuffed him. Clara rushed from the gallery, throwing her arms around him, her laugh breaking the silence. "Dad, we did it." "Damn right, kiddo," Rusty said, hugging her tight, the scent of her shampoo grounding him. Maggie joined, smiling behind her glasses. "Welcome back, Rusty," she said. "Clara's been a handful, good handful." Evelyn lingered, tears streaming, then approached. "Jack, $20,000? That's it? After everything?" "You picked your side," Rusty said, voice low. "Councilman Grayson, let them help you now. Be civil for Clara's sake or don't. Your call." "It's not fair," she whispered, voice breaking. "I've got nothing." "You had us," Rusty said, turning away, Clara's hand in his. "Lost that yourself." They left her there, a broken figure in a dead courtroom. Outside, the sun-hit Riverside Drive, the Mississippi glinting wide and muddy beyond. Rusty breathed free air, the jail's stink fading, his boots steady on Memphis soil. "Where to?" Maggie asked, keys jangling. Mud Island, Rusty said. Home. The drive was quiet, Clara chattering about Midtown High, her old friends, the house she'd prepped with Maggie's help. Rusty listened, letting her voice wash over him, the river rolling past on their left. Mud Island was a pocket of calm, narrow streets, cozy homes, the water's edge a heartbeat away. The house stood as he'd left it, white clapboard, porch sagging a little, shutters freshly painted green by Clara's hand. The upstairs tenant, a nurse named Lisa from St. Jude's, waved from her window. Inside, it smelled of wood polish and new paint. Clara and Maggie had scrubbed Evelyn's ghost out, replacing it with thrift store furniture and Southside grit. Your room's downstairs, Clara said, dragging him to the old master. Man cave's intact. Basement's all yours. Rusty grinned, dropping onto a worn couch. You've been busy, kid. Had help, she said, nodding at Maggie. Ms. Maggie's the best. Call me Maggie, she said, setting her satchel down. Southside sticks together. Whitehaven girl here. They ate lunch, BBQ from Central BBQ on Butler Avenue. Ribs and slaw Rusty devoured like a starved man. Jail food had dulled his taste, and this was heaven. Clara filled him in. Evelyn crashing with a friend in East Memphis. Grayson off the bench, the firm bankrupt. Tommy called mid-meal, voice crackling from Nashville. Brother, you're out? Tommy said, laughing. Heard the feds nailed Grayson, indicted yesterday. Evelyn's a pariah. Thanks to you, Rusty said, pride thick. You're a damn genius. Learn from the best, Tommy shot back. Clara's good? Right here, she chimed, grabbing the phone. Uncle Tommy, you're awesome. Rusty leaned back, letting them talk, Maggie watching with a quiet smile. You've got a hell of a family, she said. Damn right, Rusty said. Oh, you big, Maggie. Dinner tonight. Rendezvous downtown. Ribs on me. Deal, she said, eyes warm. Been a while since I had a night out. Evening came and they hit the Rendezvous, a Memphis institution off Union Avenue. Smoky, loud, ribs stacked high. Clara chattered, Maggie laughed, and Rusty felt human again, the jail's shadow lifting. He watched Maggie, smart, steady, a Whitehaven girl who'd fought her own battles. She'd lost a brother to a car wreck on I-2 40 years back, she'd told him over coleslaw, and Clara had filled a void. Rusty saw a spark there, something he hadn't felt since Evelyn, before the betrayal. After they drove back, the river dark and endless beside them. Maggie, Rusty said, pulling into Mud Island, whenever you're ready, let me take you out proper. No rush, just us. She paused, then smiled, soft but real. I'd like that, Rusty. Southside pace, slow and sure. Clara smirked from the back seat. Gross, Dad. Get used to it, kid, Rusty said, ruffling her hair. Weeks rolled into November. The river steady, life settling. Clara thrived at Midtown High, her grades climbing, friends crowding the porch on weekends. Rusty rebuilt, rentals in Cooper Young and Overton Square humming. A new flip started in Fraser. Maggie became a fixture. Dinners, movie nights, her quiet strength a balm to his rough edges. Evelyn faded. Word came she'd moved to Jackson, Mississippi, shacked up with a shady lawyer, chasing status in a smaller pond. Rusty didn't care. She was gone, a memory drowned in the flood. Knox got out in December, swinging by Mud Island with a six-pack and a grin. King of the block, he said, clapping Rusty's shoulder. River's still talking. Let it, Rusty said, cracking a beer on the porch, the Mississippi rolling beyond. We're done swimming. Christmas hit. Clara's 17th birthday rolled into it, a barbecue blowout with Tommy down from Nashville. Maggie frying hush puppies, Lisa the tenant pitching in. The house glowed, laughter spilling into the night, the river a quiet witness. Rusty watched Clara blow out candles, Maggie beside him, and felt whole. Southside roots deep, the flood behind him. Grayson pleaded guilty in January. Bribery, intimidation, 3 years in federal lockup. 10 lawyers, 4 paralegals, and a councilman followed. Careers and marriages wrecked in the fallout. Evelyn's name faded from Memphis gossip, her Jackson life a footnote. Rusty didn't gloat. He'd won, quieter than he'd expected. Spring came, the river swelling with rain. Rusty and Maggie grew closer. Dates at Beale Street, walks on Mud Island, a kiss one night by the water that felt like coming home. Clara teased but approved, calling Maggie bonus mom by summer. They didn't rush. South side slow, like Maggie said. But Rusty knew she was it, a partner who valued the simple over the shiny. One Sunday in June 2026, they sat on the porch, Clara sketching the river, Maggie reading beside him. "Happy?" she asked, glasses glinting. "Damn right," Rusty said, hand finding hers. "River's calm now." It was. The flood had swept clean, and Rusty Malone stood on the banks, free. Spring came, the river swelling with rain. Rusty and Maggie grew closer. Dates at Beale Street, walks on Mud Island, a kiss one night by the water that felt like coming home. Clara teased but approved, calling Maggie bonus mom by summer. They didn't rush. South side slow, like Maggie said. But Rusty knew she was it, a partner who valued the simple over the shiny. One Sunday in June 2026, they sat on the porch of the Mud Island house, the Mississippi rolling steady and wide before them. Clara sketched the river in her notebook, her pencil scratching soft against the paper, capturing the way the light danced on the water. Maggie sat beside Rusty, a book open in her lap, her glasses glinting as she glanced at him over the rims. The air was warm, thick with the scent of honeysuckle and the faint hum of life on the island. Kids biking down Harbortown, a neighbor firing up a grill. It was peace, hard-won and quiet, a far cry from the storm Rusty had ridden through. "Happy?" Maggie asked, her voice soft, cutting through the stillness. Rusty looked at her, then at Clara, then out at the river. "Damn right," he said, his hand finding hers, rough fingers lacing with her steady ones. "River's calm now." Clara looked up from her sketch, smirking. "You're getting sappy, Dad." "Earned it," Rusty shot back, grinning. "Took a hell of a fight to get here." Maggie closed her book, setting it on the porch rail. "Worth it, though?" He nodded, slow and sure. "Every damn second." They sat in companionable silence, the river's flow a steady heartbeat beneath their feet. Rusty's mind drifted, not to the jail, not to Evelyn's tears or Grayson's fall, but to the years before, when he'd first bought this house. He'd been 28, a South Side kid with a chip on his shoulder and a bank account scraped together from flipping wrecks in Fraser. He'd stood on this porch then, dreaming of a life, simple, solid, his. Evelyn had come later, twisting that dream into something gaudy and hollow, a Germantown cage he'd never fit. The flood he'd unleashed, videos, fire, broken lives, wasn't just revenge. It was a reclaiming, a tearing down of what didn't belong so he could rebuild what did. "You ever think about it?" Clara asked, pencil pausing. "All that mess, Mom, the judge, the jail?" "Sometimes," Rusty admitted, leaning back, the old chair creaking under his weight. "Not the way you'd expect, though. Ain't about winning or losing anymore." "Then what's it about?" she pressed, hazel eyes, his eyes searching him. He took a breath, the river's murmur filling the pause. "Lines, kiddo. Everyone's got one. Their river. Cross it, and you're asking for what comes. I fought 'cause they crossed mine. Took you. Took my peace. But it ain't the fight that matters. It's what you hold on to after." Maggie squeezed his hand, a quiet agreement. "And what's that?" "This," Rusty said, nodding at her, at Clara, at the house. "Family. Home. The rest. Money. Status. Revenge. It's just water under the bridge. Flows away if you let it." Clara tilted her head, considering. Kinda deep for a guy who paid Mom in pennies. Rusty laughed, a low rumble from his chest. "Had to make a point first. Sometimes you gotta flood the bastards out before you can plant something new." "Philosopher now, huh?" Maggie teased, but her smile was warm, her eyes steady. "South Side wisdom," Rusty said, tapping his temple. "Learned it the hard way." The sun dipped lower, painting the river gold, and Rusty felt it. A truth settling like silt after a storm. He'd spent a year drowning Evelyn and Grayson in their own greed, a flood of his making. But it wasn't the destruction that defined him. It was this porch, this moment. Clara sketching, Maggie beside him, the Mississippi rolling on. Revenge had been a tool, a hammer to break the chains, but it was love that built the house back up. Not the loud, flashy kind Evelyn chased, but the quiet kind, the kind that endured. He thought of his old man, a mean drunk who'd ruled their South Memphis shack with a belt and a bottle. Rusty had sworn he'd be different, stronger, better. He'd stumbled, let anger steer him too long, but here, now, he'd kept that promise. Clara was free, not just from Evelyn, but from the weight of a life she didn't want. Maggie was a chance he hadn't expected, a partner who saw the man beneath the scars. The river had taught him, cross it wrong, and it'll sweep you under. Respect it, and it'll carry you home. Dad? Clara's voice pulled him back. You're staring at the water like it's talking. Maybe it is, Rusty said, half smiling. Says we're good now. She rolled her eyes but grinned, returning to her sketch. Maggie leaned into him, her shoulder brushing his, and they watched the river together. It flowed on, steady and unyielding, a line no one dared cross again. Years later, when Clara was off at Rhodes College downtown, studying art with a scholarship she'd earned, and Maggie had moved in full-time, Rusty would sit on that porch alone sometimes, beer in hand, the river his quiet companion. He'd think back, not with regret, but with a nod to the man he'd been, the one who'd fought and flooded and found his way back. Don't cross the river wasn't just a warning to others. It was a lesson he'd carved into his own bones. Hold your ground, protect what's yours, but know when to let the current take the wreckage away. The Mississippi rolled on, and Rusty Malone sat on its banks, free, not just from jail, but from the weight of a war he'd won by choosing what stayed over what sank. That, he figured, was the deepest cut of all.